Dr. Fauci,
Hello, Edgar. I'm fine, thank you. How are you? It's a
I'm
pleasure to
very
be
well,
with
thank
you.
you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for making the time to talk to me. Dr. Fauci, I have been collecting questions from the community, public servers, public workers, and also teachers, people from the community where I'm in right now. And I would like to ask you, and they would like to ask you, if you're vaccinated, is it safe to be inside with a mask with a few friends or with friends who are also vaccinated?
In general, the answer is yes. Uh, the thing that the CDC has recently said that if you go to a public place and you're in an area of a high degree of density of infection in what we call an orange or a red zone, and you don't know the status of people, some are vaccinated, some are not. But if you have close friends and it's in an indoor setting of your home, yes, there is a minuscule risk, but it really is so small. And if everyone is vaccinated, the chances of getting infected are extremely low. And if you do, the fact is, it's very unlikely you're going to get highly symptomatic. You'll likely be asymptomatic. So the short answer, Edgar, to your question is in the home setting, fine. If you're going to go to a public place, a public indoor place, given the incredible degree of capability of this virus to spread, much, much more so than the other variant that we had a few months ago, that's the reason why we talk about masks in that public setting. But in a home setting, no, you don't have to wear a mask.
Okay. And Dr. Fauci, and this is something that worries many people, of course, families, parents. Under what conditions is it safe to reopen schools under the current Delta variant surge? And what do we know about how this current affects children compared to COVID classic, so to speak?
Yeah, the prototype COVID clearly is much less transmissible than this Delta variant. So what we are seeing right now is that we're seeing a lot of young kids that were not getting infected and getting to the hospital before getting to the hospital now. In addition to it being clearly a more transmissible virus, it's a virus that likely, from a group of international studies, a good one from Canada shows that it almost certainly and strongly suggests that it does cause more serious disease. Bottom line, Edgar, is that kids are probably more in danger of getting sick than they were with the other. That's the first thing. With regard to what do we do to the kids in school, we know now from a year and a half experience, it's a very detrimental effect on the development, the mental health, the social development of kids to keep them out of the classroom. So you want them in the classroom, but you got to make them safe. The best way to make them safe is to surround them, teachers, people who are on the staff in the schools, to make sure they get vaccinated so that you have a cushion of protection around the kids of people who are vaccinated, particularly kids who are too young to get vaccinated. Superimposed upon that, given the high degree of spread of this virus, that the recommendation from the CDC is that all schools should have everybody wearing a mask, the teachers and the kids, even if they're vaccinated, because this is such a spreading virus. And the most important thing, we got to protect the children, but we also got to get them back into the classroom.
Of course. And what is long COVID, Dr. Fauci, and how prevalent is it in the U.S.? That is also that is a question I got from a senior in the community I'm in right now. And what forms does it most often take?
Well, long COVID is a real phenomenon, Edgar. It is not just hypothetical, it's real. And depending on the study, anywhere from 10 to 33% or more. And it just depending on what study, multiple studies. It's real. It could be as low as 10, as high as 30, and maybe even more. What it means is that when you recover virologically, you get infected, the virus leaves you, you either had minimal symptoms or maybe even in the hospital, doesn't matter. You still can get a syndrome, which is very interesting and characterized by the following symptoms. profound fatigue, almost incapacitating, muscle aches, temperature dysregulation, feeling very chilly or very warm, fast heartbeat called tachycardia, sleep disturbances, and something which is referred to as brain fog, which means you really can't concentrate. I mean, it's kind of like if you had that, you'd be looking at a script for your next appearance and you just can't concentrate on what's on the paper. That would be long COVID.
Okay. And are some people more prone to it?
It's unpredictable. It appears that children have a much lower. The last study showed between 4 and 5% of the kids. And then there are some studies with adults that it goes up to 30, 40 or more percent of people who have symptoms that go on for weeks and weeks, and in some cases, months.
And Dr. Fauci, a college professor asked me to ask you this question so that he can tell it to his students. If you could, after all these months battling with this pandemic, if you could communicate one thing about COVID in a sentence or two to every person in the world, what would you say?
What I would say is that we need to take it very seriously. It is the worst pandemic of a respiratory disease that our planet has experienced in 100 years. And the one thing that's so unfortunate is that for us in this country, we are blessed with having vaccines for everybody, and yet we have an almost inexplicable pushback against vaccines among some. We've politicized a public health issue that should never, ever be politicized. We have a common enemy, and the common enemy is the virus. We have a lot of polarization in our country. We've got to put that aside and get vaccinated. That's the message to us. The message to the rest of the world is that we've got to do whatever we can to get vaccines to less fortunate countries, low and middle income countries, because a global outbreak requires a global response, and no one is safe unless everybody is safe. That's the message I would have.
Thank you, doctor. And lastly, will we need a booster? Will we need booster shots for the Delta variant?
Well, I believe, two things. I think people who are immunocompromised, people who have cancer, chemotherapy, immune deficiencies, autoimmune diseases on different drugs, they likely never got a good response to begin with. So they imminently need to get boosted up to the point where they're just at a level that's protection. The booster you're referring to is durability of response. How long does the response last? Does it last 8 months, a year, or what have you? We're looking at that now, and I have to tell you, from the data we see, we believe that sooner or later, likely sooner, we will need to give an additional shot to people who've received the vaccine. It might be, Edgar, that the real standard regimen would be 3 shots for mRNA and 2 shots for J&J. We had to move really quickly to save lives. So we did 2 shots. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to be ultimately you do need it, and that would give you durable immunity. Short answer to your question is likely, ultimately, we will need a boost.
And is there a time frame for that?
We're working that out right now. What we're doing is we're following cohorts of people and finding out when they get below a critical level that significantly diminishes their protection. Once they get there, whether that's 8 months, 9 months, 7 months, a year, as soon as we get that information, that's when we'll be recommending people get boosters. But right now, except for the immunocompromised, they're different. The normal person who's been vaccinated, right at this moment, we don't need it, but we're following it literally on a weekly and monthly basis to make a recommendation. You may be hearing about that within a reasonable period of time.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Fauci. I really appreciate you making the time to talk to us and to answer questions that came from the community, and the best of luck.
Right.
To all of us.
And thank you very much. And I understand that unfortunately you lost your grandmother from COVID. I'm very sorry. You have my condolences, and thank you for spreading the truth around. It's very helpful. Thank you.
And I have aunts and uncles in the hospital right now because of the inability, because of the lack of access to vaccines in most countries around the world. So I
All
really
right.
appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Good to be with you, Edgar. Thank you.